A moth at rest will hide many important features, but a properly prepared specimen will show off the morphology in a way that can be preserved and studied for hundreds of years. If you'd like to pin a moth, you need some basic supplies. These can be purchased at entomological supply companies such as BioQuip. You'll need a way to kill your moth, a spreading board, several sized pins, make sure they're entomology pins and not sewing pins, strips of paper, scissors, a pen, and of course, the moth. There are a lot of ways to kill an insect. Some are better at preserving the features than others. The goal is to do it quickly, humanely, and without rubbing any scales off the moth's wings. There are two common types of killing jars. A jar with plaster can be charged with ethyl acetate, or you can create a cyanide jar if you have access to a research laboratory. The time to kill a moth in a killing jar depends on the size of the moth. It can take from 5 to 30 minutes. You can squeeze the thorax of a moth between your fingers for about 1 minute, but this is not recommended for very hairy moths. You can also freeze the moth for 1 to 2 days. If your moth is frozen or stiff, you can relax it in a plastic container with damp cotton balls overnight. If it is fresh, you can pin it right away. Take a size 2 pin and put it straight through the thorax. Don't be afraid to reposition the pin if you need to. Once the moth is on the pin, you can gently move it to the correct height. So how high do you really want your moth on the pin? This first moth is way too high up. You can just imagine trying to pick up that pin with your fingers and you'll just break the moth right off. But if it's too low, there's no room for any labels and it could even hit the bottom of the tray. What you really want is the moth to be about 1 centimeter from the top of the pin. With your moth at the correct height, you can press the pin gently into the center of your spreading board. This first moth is too high, as the wings are floating above the surface of the wood. The second moth is too low. If you tried spreading the wings, it will leave a weird dent in the wings when it's dry. The third moth is at the ideal height. You want those wings perfectly flush with the board. Don't worry too much about the legs, though they should be tucked under the body and not on top of the board. Now make sure you always remember to keep a label with your specimen. You might think you have a good memory, but chances are, if you leave that moth on the spreading board for a few weeks, you'll forget where it's from. You always want to keep it safe and at least include the location, the date, and the collector's name. You can also add other information like the species name or a database code. You'll want to type up a more detailed, proper, and smaller label for your specimen later. To start spreading the moth, you should start with the forewings. The goal is to bring each wing upward so they're symmetrical, as in this picture here. How high to bring up the wings really depends on the shape of the species. You want the specimen to look natural while showing important features of the wings. It doesn't matter which wing you start with, as you'll develop your own technique and style. This is where you'll use the 000 pins. Using one pin, find the leading edge of the wing and drag it ever so gently forward. Be very careful not to tear the wing. It usually works best if you try to drag it from the middle portion of the wing. And don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. You can always try it again. Moving the hind wings can be a bit trickier. They should end up tucked underneath the forewings like this. To position each wing, use a 000 pin to find a vein towards the top edge of the hind wing. Gently pull the wing forward, tucking it underneath the forewing and sticking the 000 pin into the spreading board. If the hind wing ends up on top, you can use another pin to carefully lift the forewing. So here's a review of some common wing spreading mistakes. The wings in this top picture are not symmetrical and will not make a very nice specimen. The forewings in the middle picture are far too high, completely exposing the hind wings. The forewings in the bottom picture are too low, drooping over the hind wings, so you can't see all the features. To check for symmetry, look at the angle of each forewing and the gap between the forewing and the hind wing. These should all be even. Once the wings are where you want them, cut out some strips of paper to hold down the wings. Use size 2 pins to pin the paper to the spreading board, although you really want to make sure you don't pin straight through the wing. At this point, you can use as many pins as you'd like, and you could even take out those 000 pins if you think the wings are really held in place, but this is up to you. So here's one moth being pinned from start to finish. With your moth pinned and spread, the only preservation required is allowing it to dry. Choose a cool, dry place to keep your spreading board where it will not be disturbed, and leave it on the spreading board for 2 to 3 days. You'll want to leave it on the board longer if you're in a very humid climate or if the moth is very large. You'll know the moth is done by gently touching the abdomen with a pin. If the abdomen moves, it's not dry. If the abdomen feels very stiff, it is probably ready. Once the moth is dry, remove the paper and gently remove the pins. Your result is a beautiful moth specimen. But you're not quite done yet. Before your moth can truly become a scientific specimen, it needs to be properly labeled. Using size 4 font, type up all the important information, including the full locality label, including GPS coordinates if you can, the collector's name, the date, and any other information, such as where the larva was collected. You'll want to space these labels evenly on the pin underneath your specimen while making sure they're not too close to the specimen's body. This is a good height for your labels. And there you have it. Now you can take a live moth and turn it into a properly preserved specimen.